Alright, let's dig right in. First on the list is 2012's Fez, developed by one-hit wonder Polytron. The game makes countless references and homages to Nintendo classics, especially Zelda. The game's Navi-like fairy companion, the opening of treasure chests, and even the game starting in our hero's bedroom, which by the way has a Zelda 1 poster on the wall, are all nods to the Nintendo franchise, Ocarina of Time in particular. The game follows its protagonist Gomez through his 2.5D world, in which he can flip the perspective 90 degrees at the push of a button, often creating optical illusions which are necessary in order to move forward, and collect the game's 128 cubes, most of which are made up of 8 smaller cubes. Not only does Fez sport some really clever, unique puzzles, but as you can see, it's all wrapped in a beautiful 8-bit wrapper and has one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in any game, ever. It's worth noting that Fez also has a beautiful day-night cycle that moves quickly at just 5.5 minutes per day, with some events occurring only at specific times in certain locations. The game also has no enemies and no punishment for dying. There are no lives or game overs, and when you die, you instantly respawn exactly where you died. The game is never frustrating, but certainly isn't easy, as you'll come across some real head-scratchers searching through its large and varied environments, totaling maybe 15 to 25 hours. I've replayed the game 4 or 5 times and always end up just shy of 100% completion, but despite that, I'm never willing to give in and look up the solutions I'm missing on the internet, because I'm happy to know there's always a little bit left to figure out when I come back to Fez next time around. The game won countless Game of the Year awards when it released back in 2012, and it belongs on the Nintendo Switch. Next up is 2009's Shadow Complex, a game that YouTube's Arlo called one of the best Metroid games you're likely to play. It was the $15 downloadable game that convinced me to shell out $300 for an Xbox 360 after playing a friend's copy. Or put another way, I paid $315 just for this game. Creative director Donald Mustard was quoted in an interview as saying, "Super Metroid is the pinnacle of 2D gaming, and there's no reason we shouldn't be pushing that pinnacle forward and see what else we can do with it." In other words, Mustard set out on a mission to out-Metroid Metroid itself, and in my opinion, he succeeded. At the time, Metroid hadn't seen a 2D release in 5 years since Zero Mission, and Mustard decided that, well, if Nintendo wasn't going to make a new Metroid game, he would. So he ordered all his staff to replay Super Metroid, Metroid Fusion, and Zero Mission, and set about replaying those games again and again himself until he had cleansed his system of anything other than Metroid. The game definitely does a lot of things Metroid either does not or cannot do, and doesn't feel like a genre ripoff or a been there, done that excursion for those of us who have played and replayed all the Metroid games countless times ourselves. Instead of upgrading Samus's arm cannon, Shadow Complex's lead character Jason Fleming finds a handgun, which he eventually drops when he finds a machine gun, then later a shotgun, and so on. Something that makes a huge difference in gameplay is that because you're mostly firing at humans rather than alien creatures, headshots are a thing, and they can be really fun to pull off, and oftentimes crucial when playing in the game's harder difficulties. Oh yeah, and the game's got 4 difficulty settings: casual, normal, hardcore, and insane, which adds an extra layer of replayability on top of the massive amounts of replayability the game would have had anyway without 4 difficulty offerings. Shadow Complex will last you about 15 to 25 hours on your first playthrough, depending on how much time you spend scouring the map, looking for hidden upgrades, so you're really getting a lot of Metroid-style goodness for the few dollars you'll be shelling out for this game. The map works the same as in classic Metroid games, laid out in squares with hidden upgrades peppered all throughout, some of which are ripped straight out of Metroid like missiles, energy tanks, and the speed booster, but the game also includes some unique collectibles and upgrades of its own that I won't spoil for you. Shadow Complex also has a leveling up system and in-game achievements, and the game has a compelling story all its own. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, so I'll just tell you who the antagonists are, which you figure out pretty early in the game anyway. The bad guys are a far-right paramilitary militia group on the cusp of carrying out a coup to assassinate American leaders and take control of the US government. Now that's one hell of a plot for a Metroid game. Shadow Complex, like Fez, is a game that has huge amounts of respect for the Nintendo franchises that inspired them, but managed to deliver a product that feels all its own and received endless amounts of critical acclaim at the time, and it needs to be on the Switch. Number 3 on our list is Braid, which frankly I'm stunned hasn't been ported to a Nintendo system already. Like Fez, Braid tips its hat more than once to the big N and also has a fantastic soundtrack and a really unique and engaging hook. Braid is a side-scroller puzzler, but what makes it stand out is that at any time you can rewind the gameplay, like when you die or just miss a difficult jump. Again, like Fez, that doesn't make the game easy, it just cuts down on frustration. You'll die a lot in Braid, but when you do, the game stops and leaves you with no option to rewind to right before that mistake that caused your untimely death, or even farther if you like. In all the game's worlds, you're allowed to rewind at your leisure, but some of the game's worlds follow their own rules which are different to the rules that govern the others. For example, in one world time moves forward when you move forward, and backwards when you walk back, and stands still when you stand still, making for some really bizarre puzzles. Even the music plays backwards and forwards with Tim's movements. In some stages, anything that glows green is unaffected by your manipulations of time, which can either act as a way of reaching a solution, or as an obstacle to impede your progress. Progress, by the way, is measured in puzzle pieces, of which there are 60 spread out over the game's 38 levels, which comprise the game's 5 worlds. Unfortunately, Braid is quite a bit shorter than both Fez and Shadow Complex, so I'm trying to avoid showing you more than a couple solutions here in this preview. Unlike the first 2 games on this list, Braid does come with unlockable time trials for certain puzzle pieces, but if you're not a speedrunner, you might find yourself reaching 100% completion after just 10 or 12 hours. And sadly, Braid just doesn't have as much replayability as those other 2 games. I've replayed the game several times, but because so much of the fun is in those aha moments, you'll need to wait a while between playthroughs to give yourself a chance to forget solutions to some of the game's puzzles. On the other hand, of these 3 games, it's probably the most fun to watch a friend play, even after having completed the game yourself. All that being said, the game's length is my only complaint, and I can't recommend this game more highly, which is why it's yet another game that'll be a shame if it doesn't end up making its way to the Nintendo Switch. All 3 of these games show a lot of love and respect for Nintendo and its franchises, yet have never graced any of Nintendo's consoles. What's more, these are 3 games that can both complement and compete with the expanded Nintendo Switch Online library, showcased in this channel's previous video, which I'll link to here in case you didn't see it. These are timeless classics and they belong on the Switch, simple as that. Okay, thanks for watching. If you want to support this channel and agree with our vision for the future of Nintendo, click the like and subscribe buttons. Okay, lava out.